We strongly believe that clinical trials that could bring life-saving therapies to patients need to move faster, need to be more efficient, and need to be cheaper. And if we do that, we'll be able to get faster life-saving therapies to patients.
Built this week, breaking it down. Built this week, we show you how. A fresh idea, a clever tweak. You locked in, you built this week.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Built This Week, the podcast where we share what we're building, how we're building it, and what it means for the world of AI and startups. I'm Sam Nadler, co-founder here at Rise Labs, and each and every week I'm joined by my friend, co-host, and business partner, Jordan Metzner. How you doing today, Jordan?
Yo, Sam, another new episode, exciting week, great new guest, lots going on in the world of AI, like every week. I mean, some crazy news, both in politics of AI and just, a lot of new AI features and products coming out of Frontier Labs. So exciting new episode and looking forward to chat.
Absolutely. And I'd love to introduce our guest, Dr. Chadi from Ryght AI. Ryght AI is an AI platform that builds digital twins. Dr. Chadi, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're building.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you guys. I'm a medical oncologist and a hematologist by training. I practiced on the provider side for 2 decades, for about 20 years, and then I transitioned after that to industry. So I held several positions. One of them was with Cardinal Health as Chief Medical Officer, and then Caris Life Sciences as the chair of the Precision Oncology Alliance. Caris Life Sciences, focuses on genomics and multiomics. And then I've joined Ryght AI about 2 years ago as Chief Medical Officer and Head of Strategy. What we're doing is at Ryght, we strongly believe that clinical trials that could bring life-saving therapies to patients need to move faster, need to be more efficient, and need to be cheaper. And if we do that, we'll be able to get faster life-saving therapies to patients. So we are focused on enhancing and accelerating clinical trial operations by matching any clinical trial of any therapeutic area against the most precise and the best sites that are going to execute on this clinical trial at scale and globally. To do that, we have built digital twins for every clinical trial site in the world that have done any kind of clinical trial in any therapeutic areas. We have a secure platform that really allows us to match the clinical trial against all of these sites using, again, agentic AI and generative AI platforms. So that's what we're doing. We'll go into more detail, I'm sure, with that, but that's really very high level.
Perfect. I love it. And we will go into more detail. But before we do, don't forget to like and subscribe. We have new episodes out every week with great guests like we do today. Hit that button and be reminded on every Friday. And the docket, we're going to demo a little something we built with Ryght in mind. And, like we do in every episode, this may be totally off base. I did my best to try and kind of capture maybe something that would be interesting for Ryght. But as you can see, this is a digital twin dashboard and could show the difference between manually selecting a site versus using AI. So let me kind of walk you through this trial strategy snapshot. And let's start a tour, actually. I think that would be really helpful. So, first, the digital twin. This dashboard simulates the clinical trial network using historical performance data and predicts enrollment velocity, diversity, and risk in real time. Obviously, these trials, the goal is to, I'm assuming, finish on time and either under or at cost and with the right markers involved. So the status quo problem, we're currently simulating a standard manual site selection strategy. Most sponsors over-index on tier 1 academic centers where enrollment could be slow and diversity could be below target. With that, there could be financial consequence. So inefficiency has a price. You could run over time. You could run over in terms of cost. There could be regulatory risk. And with that, we can have AI optimized output. So the strategic advantage is, we can recover the 2 month delay and hit diversity targets. So, with this AI optimized output in terms of site selection, maybe, Emory Healthcare could be a great option versus, a tier one clinic that's ranked a little bit lower, like the Mayo Clinic. So is this somehow, and you could like trigger these simulation parameters that have, biomarker complexity. How does that change the ranking of these sites, which could be a better fit for the clinical trial? Overlay the census overlay. You have the potential strategic tension with equity. Is this somewhere in the realm of like how your business is thinking about site selection and why it matters?
Yeah, I mean, I think somewhat. So obviously, for the sites to execute on any clinical trial, they need to have qualitative capabilities for that specific study, or for quantitative capabilities in terms of what they can actually do in terms of enrollment and getting patients on. And these vary between sites. And to your earlier point, there are large academic sites. There are also the smaller community sites. There are sites in the US. There are sites in Europe, Australia, and so on. Our goal is to help rapidly identify the best sites for this specific study. If I step back, Sam, I will say, why do clinical trials fail? First of all, they're costly. It takes 10 to 15 years to get a clinical trial to enroll. These are the trials that are going to change standard of therapy, standard of care. And $1 to $3 billion. And by the way, 90% of drugs and trials don't really get you a drug to market. But trials fail because either the drug doesn't work that you are studying, or because it's toxic, so you cannot give it because it could work, but it's just too toxic, or simply because the trial did not enroll. So you never really got to the yes or no. You never got to that point. And when you look at the statistics don't lie. 80% of trials run behind schedule, 50% of sites enroll just 0 to 1 patients. And from a sponsor perspective, time is money. This is a lot of money to activate the sites and then don't enroll. So we wanted to disrupt this by focusing on the third element. We're not making drugs, we're not really reducing toxicity, but what we can do, we can help sponsors identify the sites that are best for this particular study. And we also connect them with the right principal investigator, with the right person who's going to bring that trial and champion it internally, because that's going to help with enrollment. Subsequent to that, we also automate a lot of the mundane work. So we allow actually the exchange between sponsors, between sites, and so on. So there's really this end-to-end solution between the two major stakeholders in that space. So your point is well taken that you have all of these sites, but maybe the site that is ranked in this particular list as number 20, it could be the best site for this specific trial that is going on there. And the only way to do that is by linking the trial and the specific needs of that trial against the capabilities of that site. And I'll just say one other thing is there are a lot of nuances. So you're talking with a sponsor that have a specific interest of having that particular trial enroll in Europe because they have a regulatory goal in Europe, as an example, strategically. Well, where do you go in Europe if you have a specific regulatory component that you need to actually achieve? So we select the right sites that are able to execute on that. So I like what you're built here. I think it's pretty intuitive, and you certainly picked up on what we're doing. We're literally, I mean, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make that link and be able to really rank these sites. So whenever we get these sites, we end up having a score. We tier the sites into 3 tiers: tier one, tier two, tier three. And the tier one, usually the ones that are most likely to succeed in enrollment, tier two less, and tier three the least.
Incredibly interesting. Tell me a little bit about, we talked about on our call, but how does kind of diversity and the biomarker complexity kind of influence the results and or just the trials themselves?
It's a really important question that, when you look at existing clinical trials in the US and, cancer takes the lion's share of these trials, but even cardiovascular, metabolic, neuroscience, and so on, most patients that are enrolled in these clinical trials do not represent the demographics of the US. So you see often 90 to 99% of patients enrolled are Caucasian, while 25% of patients in the US are considered non-Caucasian. You'll see a lot of folks who are enrolled who have good socioeconomic status. They're able to travel. They have good psychosocial support and so on. And that's really not what you see in real life. So what we do, because we have the digital twins globally, at least in the US, we have the ability to link that against the US census. And I think you have that, the census overlay, which is really interesting. So you're able to actually tell in the using the US Census and API into the US Census, what are the demographics of the patient population each particular site serves. So if you have a particular study that requires 20 or 25% underrepresented minorities, then that becomes actually high on the list when you are deciding to tier these sites. And you're able to recommend sites that serve this patient population. So the denominator is higher. The biomarker overlay is really critical. And as you know, at least in cancer, all of the trials now have biomarkers or mutations or things that you have to actually look at. The way we do that is several ways. But as you know, we have ability to look at every clinical trial that each site has done in the past because we are linked to clinicaltrials.gov where you have the repository of all clinical trials that have been done at each particular site. And if you know that a specific site has conducted prior studies that required biomarker testing, then at least you know they have that capability. If you know more granular details that this particular site has conducted studies in the EGFR mutated tumors, then you know that at least they have that patient population. So you actually rank them higher because that information is available through clinicaltrials.gov. So we basically look at past experience of these sites that allows us to predict also future success. If you have a sponsor that have come back and forth to this specific site many times before for their particular studies, then that site must have been successful in enrollment and so on. So that census and biomarker is key, especially in the cancer world. And I think it's going to be beyond cancer as well. But that's how we do it for now. And we're able to try to partner also. We're trying to form strategic partnerships with a lot of entities out there that we can layer out the genomic data on the digital twins. That's work in progress on the roadmap.
That's awesome. I guess I think kind of following up on what Sam has said, I'm sure a lot of like kind of site matching has like always been a problem in this circumstance. How has AI specifically, I mean, you started to talk about like the ability to leverage like, the DNA markers, et cetera. But how has AI kind of like pivoted the business in the sense or like given it like kind of acceleration or ability to kind of make these twins, and how is it? I mean, obviously previously it was done with like, I guess like SQL type data, right? You would like run these kind of data queries and try to find, some type of data information. But I guess with a larger data set, obviously AI becomes incredibly more powerful. But yeah, maybe how has AI made it like a really big impact?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Jordan, I mean, the mass of data, just you can't really do any of this manual at this point. But a couple of things are really important just to explain maybe a use case. Some of there are AI agents that we actually have built that allow us to find the right contact individual for each particular site. That's downstream after you select the sites. But before that, the AI is able to infer a lot of the capabilities of a specific site based on prior studies that they have conducted. An example, if site A has conducted a phase one trial in whether it's a basket trial, umbrella trial, or one tumor trial, just because they've conducted a phase one trial and the trial has opened, we know that they can conduct pharmacogenomic studies, pharmacokinetic studies. We know that they're able to do X, Y, and Z. So the AI infers the information from prior experience and gives us the capabilities of this particular site. The other thing where we leveraged AI is reading the protocol. So when we upload a particular study that could be 200-page study in any therapeutic area, we have 13 AI agents that dissect and parse out, read the entire protocol. We have an AI agent that reads the title, an AI agent for the schedule events, an AI agent for the biomarker, an AI agent for the endpoints, and so on. So by parsing the protocol in a matter of seconds, by the time you upload the protocol and click on the AI and so on, it just within seconds, the AI read all of the protocol and what it requires. What does it actually require to what does this trial requires? It requires a site that has an MRI machine, they did a CT scanner, all of these things. And then it matches that against digital twins. So reading the protocol is an example, inference is an example, and the third example is the AI agent that brings you the best contact person for this specific site for this specific trial.
That's awesome. This is the second or third, I think, healthcare focused AI enabled guest we've had on our podcast, and both in wildly different areas, but just showing how AI becomes like a super enabler, even for industries that are obviously like, more traditional, like healthcare. Sam, what do you think? We go to the news?
Yeah, well, no, actually, I have one more question if you don't mind. Like, I can, and maybe this highlights my unfamiliarity with the space, but I can totally see why CROs and sponsors are coming to you for the tool. Do sites themselves also, who maybe less recognized and who want to do more of these kind of, are they reaching out and saying, hey, like these are our capabilities? Like, is that something that happens?
I think Sam should be working with us. I think he probably was I think you were on our call last week, on our call or something. The, the the answer is absolutely yes. But as you know, Sam, we have just to be strategic and we have to think what we could do today versus the roadmap and so on. But absolutely, we have a site strategy, and one of this is exactly what you said. There are so many sites out there that have certain capabilities, but they could be forgotten because nobody really has reached out to them and know them. So we are building an entire platform for the sites where the sites actually go in and they're able to update the information, tell us the information that they have, because maybe they can add more information we cannot get. I mean, we can only get information that is available out there, but there are certain proprietary information that I may not be able to have unless the sites volunteer that, and we're building this. We're also connecting the sites with the sponsors to make sure that if a site, I was having conversation with a site just about last week, and they said, one of our interest is studies in colorectal cancer. And for whatever reason, we haven't had a lot of trials in colorectal cancer because the investigators that we have are not necessarily well known. You'd like to build their clinical trial portfolio. So a site like this could come to our platform and show that they have a lot of interest in colorectal cancer. They have capabilities, they just have not gotten the chance. And then they get ranked higher because we have that information and we're able to link. So the answer is a resounding yes. And that's actually happening. Hopefully, by the next time we meet again, you'll see a lot of this progressing. I mean, this it's very, very close actually, where you're going to hear about what we're doing on the side. I would say in less than a couple of months, you're going to hear on a press release for that.
All right. We wanted to choose something a little bit health focused. Obviously, sleep is really important. I think there's been a lot of recent trends in healthcare pop culture news about how important sleep is in the last couple years. Maybe it's always been important. Maybe it's always been trending important, but I feel like lately, and Eight Sleep, this, I'm not even too familiar about the product. I know this, it's really this high-end mattress where you can personalize it with cold air, warm air, elevation, etc. Just raised 50 million at a 1.5 billion dollar valuation. So obviously doing pretty well, I'm assuming. Have you, either of you, used Eight Sleep? Are you, I believe it's a subscription model. Are you subscribers? Have you sat on the bed? Have you tried it? And what do you think in general of this news?
I am not. I read the article and I was a bit fascinated by the valuation. I'm like, oh my God. But clearly there's a huge market for this. I need something like this. I don't sleep well at all. Seems like, yeah, I mean, I don't know what Jordan thinks. I was a bit fascinated by the technology and more fascinated, honestly, by not the market valuation, but more of there's such a huge market for this. Like I didn't appreciate that much until I read this.
Yeah, so I don't have an 8 sleep, but I've read both sides, kind of like customers that are fanatical about it and saying that's changed the way they sleep, and then also heard like horror stories of like water leakage in their house and kind of not having a great experience. Maybe that's, both are kind of like vocal minorities, but yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not a doctor, so I think that was like it would be interesting to get your take on it, but I think the idea of being able to lower your body temperature while sleeping for people who sleep hot and I guess maybe the opposite direction, but, in an effort to kind of, improve the quality of sleep for the time that you have it, is an interesting idea. I think this is, I'm not exactly sure how the subscription aligns, and like what happens if you stop paying the subscription, but does your
You
bed
can
like
no
stay
longer
hot?
sleep on your own bed. Yeah, you have to stay hot at night.
You have to sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
I mean, sleep is important. I think this would be a perfect infomercial at 2 a.m. on all the channels when you're like trying to flick through the TV at 2 a.m. and you can't sleep and you get the infomercial for this.
Yeah, I wonder if they have a solution for my, anxiety that keeps me up at night. I don't feel it's like a comfort issue. It's more of a mind issue. But yeah, just a fun article. I need to like see a store. Can you see these in a store, or is it just an e-commerce solution?
I don't know if they have a retail location. I don't believe so, but yeah, it's e-commerce mostly.
But that actually, what you said, Sam, is really important. I mean, when people have insomnia or don't sleep, how much of this is really because of the posture and the actual comfort versus whatever? I mean, all of these things, anxiety, work, burnout, there's so many things, and that's not going to be fixed with the mattress. But the market is telling us otherwise.
Yeah, totally. Well, speaking of retail, one of our, arguably one of the biggest retailers in the world, if not the biggest, Apple just released a low cost or lower cost MacBook, a 599 version. I think it's like a competitor to the Chromebook. I'm personally having two children, really excited about this. But yeah, I think it was a long time coming to get an Apple computer at this price point.
But I mean, I think the power and the memory, like I didn't get a chance to finish the whole thing. Like I wasn't sure what it's probably, I mean, obviously it doesn't have the same capabilities as the larger ones, no?
Yeah, I mean, they have smaller hard drives and memory for RAM, but I think the key is that they're using the A series of chips that's available in the iPhone versus using the M series of chips that are historically in the iPad and in the Mac, the rest of the Mac series. So I think that's like the biggest step down. Whether that has like a significant performance impact is to be seen, as this is like a new series of computers untested yet. But to Sam's point, it competes with a Chromebook, and I'd probably prefer a low powered Mac than a Chromebook, just because you get kind of the access to the entire operating system. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't tried them yet, but $600 is a pretty good entry price point to get someone to use a Mac computer.
Chadi, before we wrap up, thank you for joining. I also want to plug that you're an author with multiple books, and a new book coming out or just recently came out or coming out.
Yeah, it's coming out in a couple of months. It's AI and cancer care, and it's not a tech book. It's not a medical book. It's really a book that's written for everyone who wants to understand a bit about AI, to have an intelligent conversation, not to be intimidated by all of these AI jargon that they hear everywhere, but more importantly, how does it affect the cancer journey and their cancer care? So it's really written in a very simple conversation. So I appreciate it. Yeah, it should be coming out in few months.
What's the name of the book?
Yeah, how can people find you?
Yeah, it's called the AI and Cancer Care When Machines Meet Modern Medicine. I have a website, www.chadinabhan.com, and I think people will have information on my prior books and my upcoming books, as well on my podcast, which is very healthcare focused, Healthcare Unfiltered.
I've got a last question. So I've always heard that Google is a doctor's worst nightmare because the patients would come in saying, hey, I Googled all my symptoms and I got this disease, I got this thing. Is that now 10 times worse with ChatGPT? All the patients are calling in pre-diagnosing themselves, or is it actually helpful?
I think it's very helpful, and I actually write that in the book and the prior book, which is called The Cancer Journey. I think having an informed patient and family is 10 times better than having someone who is not informed. And I really don't think any physician is ever going to meet a patient or a family today, at least in the US, right? It's like in different countries maybe different, but in the US, people are going to look things up. They're going to talk to their family, their friends, they're going to be advised. So there's no the idea that somebody's going to come to you and they're going to hear for the first time about a diagnosis or a prognosis is just not practical. So a lot of times what's really important for the physician is to help patients and families really separate the signal from noise, the myths from facts, and guide them into online sources that are really more reputable and more, you can trust them, more trustworthy as opposed to not. You go on Twitter, you go everywhere. There's no filter, there's no peer review. I could tweet anything I want. I could put a video on YouTube and so on. When I have time, sometimes I go in and I see some of the videos that really drive me crazy, and I feel I have to really counter that and put it on my channel just to explain to patients and family that some of the information that is really incorrect. But people are going to use online. I personally embrace it. I just guide people and say, you're going to do this anyway, may as well do it differently. I'll just say one more thing is I think in the future, the chat GPT and all of these LLMs are going to be 100 times better. I think we all agree to that, but also they're going to really be attuned to every specific patient. They're going to almost know that patient and know what they want and so on. And the information is going to be really custom made to this particular individual. And I think it's going to help a lot of patients. And that's what I project. So I think it's going to be net positive as opposed to net negative.
Yeah, totally agree. Obviously, there's a lot to come with AI. It's just the early days. And yeah, it seems like definitely in healthcare, it's going to be a net positive for patients, for doctors, for the system overall. And that's super exciting. All right, Sam, great episode. Great to meet you, doctor. Great. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks, everyone. See y'all next week. Every week, we got a new episode on Built This Week. And thanks, doctor, for joining us. And see you soon.
Built this week.